Hello humans, this is Tommy at InCamera, and today we're going to be using an everyday fish tank to shoot some elements for an underwater sequence. Now if you saw our previous episode on shooting the dry for wet technique, you'll know that we've got a sequence of shots that follow our intrepid explorers to the depths of the ocean floor, using a miniature model submersible. Using smoke, light and motion control, we came away with some gorgeous shots, but there's more that we can add to these shots to further sell the effect that it's a submersible in deep water. And that's where water elements come in. So let's get wet. So this is a 120 litre aquarium tank, which I picked up on a local ad site for less than 100 quid. Welcome to our storage facility. Oh God. Why are those plates there? Why are we keeping it at the top of the stairs? Now you can use much smaller fish tanks to do water elements, but for what we're doing, this is a really great size because it's allow us to get really wide shots of those silty elements that we're after. Now we've sat it on top of these wooden plinths to support it, just to get it a little way off the ground. Now you could use a table, but it's worth mentioning that if you're going to, make sure it's really solid, because when we filled this up, it's over 100 kilos. A kilo being the equivalent weight to a litre. So if it's 120 litres and you fill it up, that's 120 kilos. Now the first thing you need to do is make sure the tank is clean. The last thing you want is to fill it with water to find it's full of dust and lint. A little tip, if you backlight the glass when you're cleaning it, it'll bring up any smears on the glass. Next up, we black out the back and the bed of the tank, as this is essentially our background, which we'll be keying out. So we're just lining this with blackout drape, but you can use, black plastic from, a bin bag or a garbage bag. We're just kind of using this because this is what we've got. You've got to weight it down because as soon as you put water in there, everything wants to float up. So you've got to make sure you have weights. I like to work out, it's no big deal. Once we're happy with the interior, we start filling the tank. This is going to take a while. Hey! Whoa! Just going to keep it low to begin with. Hey! This thing is...
Oh, it's going on your laptop.
This thing is aggressive. Oh, I think I need to select a different thing. And then, yeah, that's the way. Just going to leave that there for a few hours. Oh, I think let's just maybe just gaffer it to there. Then we discuss our lighting options. But first things first.
We'll have a cup of tea and then come back.
Yeah, cup of tea. Good. And cut to surprisingly pleasing time-lapse shot. Now we've got 3 elements that we need on our list. Firstly, we want to get some nice floating particles. As we shot our miniatures in smoke instead of water, we want to add particles to the image to help sell it as water. And for this, we actually don't need to put anything in the water, as there will always be particles in water that's coming out of the tap.
It's revealing the tap water in its full glory.
Yeah. Revealing all of the elements of Bristol Water's finest. So in order to highlight these particles, we just need to backlight the water with a single hard light. So we're going with a Fresnel, tungsten Fresnel, instead of the big soft LED light, because the problem with big soft lights is they're really hard to shape. And that's a really sort of big thing in lighting. Soft lights are lovely if you're sort of lighting a person and you want it to be all nice and lovely on the skin and stuff. But when you're doing stuff like this or lots of other things, a shapeable light is like the most flexible light, because you can make a hard light soft, you can't make a soft light hard. So when you start with a hard light, it means if you want soft, you put some diffusion in front of it. If you want it hard, you've got it hard. And also, these have a kind of spot and flood, which is essentially just a mechanical thing of moving the bulb back and forth in the housing. And so we can focus it, we can make it really narrow. We can obviously use the barn doors to cut out a lot of the light. And that's what we're needing to do here, is cutting out light, because we don't want any reflection on the camera. We want everything to be as dark as possible, except that one little area that we need to be lit up. So that's why we're going hard. Then we add some flags to control the light spill and stop it hitting the background. We also want to make sure there's no light falling on the camera to negate any chance of there being a reflection of it in the glass. So I put a floppy behind the camera, but also wrap blackout around the camera rig itself. I think I'll just try and just keep all the rigging stuff this side, then at least we've got a clear way through on the other side. How's that?
Great.
Great. Okay, so I'm just going to take it basically to where the edge of that frame is. So you
Yeah,
shouldn't be losing anything there,
Yeah,
but...
That's way better.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Nice. As our backlight is quite high, I offer up a net to try and reduce some of the exposure at the top of the frame, making small adjustments till we get it just right.
Try from below again.
Yeah.
Tickle it up a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, about there would be good.
Yeah?
Yeah,
Okay.
that'd be ideal.
Alright.
You can make it very low contrast very quickly the deeper you see.
Yeah.
So if you can minimise that to quite a shallow field, that helps us because we'll be able to see a separation there.
Gotcha. Just to save putting too many stands everywhere, I'm just going to attach a magic arm to this stand so that we can put our flag in without taking up any more space. Things fall off, it's fine. It's fine. So let me know where's good.
I mean, I'll grab some of this.
Grab some of this while it's there, and then maybe give it a little stir just to get rid of these weird... Yeah, I don't want to say what it looks like. If you know, you know. We're actually shooting at a mixture of frame rates, sometimes 25, which is our project frame rate, using 50 anytime we want to slow down or steady particle movement.
I think we're getting a lot more than was first expected. So this is literally just clean water, or half clean water, in our tank, and it's already giving us quite a few little micro bubbles and wispy particles and things like that, which should work really well once we combine it with our footage that we shot. So this kind of water tank setup is also quite good for anything kind of ethereal or space-like, because what you're getting is all the tiny details that you have in a free-flowing volume of liquid. So the irony is sometimes the smaller that you go, or the closer that you get to very small particles, is that they can sometimes take on a huge scale, if that makes sense, because it can sometimes trick the eye into thinking that you're looking at like a galaxy or a nebula or something that is so huge that actually occurs in nature. You only have to look at Hubble composite photographs from galaxies billions and billions of miles away, and they take on a very similar look, which is so many points of light or so many stars and gaseous volumes that all add to this incredible detail that you can get somewhat close to simulating, but on a very small scale. It's very strange.
Next up, bubbles. As the sub descends through the water, it would release the uncompressed air from its tanks in order to sink. We put the camera onto a saddlebag to achieve a lower angle and adjust our flags and nets to accommodate. We actually found that when we just pulled the material taut, it released a lot of bubbles. So we did that first and rolled on it. Sometimes you just try something simple, and if it works, you don't have to overcomplicate it. To get some more localized bubbles for our sub-tanks, we first dropped a spigot into the water, which released some nice singular bubbles. And then to get something a little more energetic, we drop in a bit of Alka-Seltzer. We did a couple of those, and then we figured why not drop most of the tablet in. Once you set up for something like this, it can really pay to just play around, have some fun with it, and try things. You never know what you might get.
What we're going to try and attempt to do now is simulate the silt that's at the bottom of the ocean that will get kicked up by the movement of the sub and the extension arms from the sub.
For this, we used milk from a syringe ejected through a tube at the bed of the tank. First we're going to try some cow juice, sorry cows, and then we're going to try some oat milk for the vegans, just to see if that works. Sorry vegans. About there?
Yeah, I mean,
do you want me to sort of fire it into the floor?
Yeah, fire it into the floor.
Yeah, okay. Whoop, hello.
That is fine.
Yeah, let it out.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, coming out.
Perfect. And now we've just got a slow...
Oh my god, yeah, it's weird, isn't it?
It's almost like dry ice underwater.
Yeah. Because milk is white, it's more visible against the black backdrop, and so provides a great matte. Also, it's denser than water, so it disperses very slowly and hangs nicely in the water. So that was quite nice to just kind of really localize where that little blob is, and then it all just starts coming out from there.
In reality, it would be quite a wide dispersion, but obviously we're talking miniature here, so anything we can try and do to localize the effect, the better. Yeah, all this stuff in terms of adding to the layering effect of giving the impression that we're underwater is pretty much what sells the shot, I think.
Yeah. I mean, that, and we shot the miniatures really, really well.
Well, of course.
Okay, so we've got all of our elements shot. Next thing to do is to composite those elements into our submarine miniature shots. But before we go over to JP for the final step, remember, do the likey, do the subscribey, hit the bell icon so you know when the next video is going to land, and leave us a comment. Let us know if there's something you'd love to know how it's done, or if there's a classic effect that you'd love to see recreated. That's why we're here. All right, post time. So here we are in the edit, and we're going to take you through how we composite these element shots from our fish tank into our submarine shots. But we thought it might be quite fun to just go back a little bit and actually just take a look at some of the test shots that we did in the early days when we first got hold of our fish tank. I mean, you've done some stuff before. This was kind of like the biggest tank, I think, maybe that you'd played with. It was my first time, so it's nice to break the cherry on that one. We wanted to kind of get a sense of what we could achieve, the best way that we can light stuff, and what we needed to do in terms of, blacking out the space, which was quite a challenge as well, wasn't it? So
yeah, we learned quite a few things, mostly with lighting, I think.
Yeah.
And the inherent limitations I think you have with where you can light from whilst trying to minimize reflections.
Yeah. But I think when we were testing this, we were testing it from the perspective of wide shots as opposed to macro.
Yeah.
Right?
We had our tank and we very quickly went through what everyone would do with a tank and a camera and some paint and just inject some paint and some mica powder that was diluted down.
So that's what this is, the white stuff and the blue stuff.
Yeah.
Is mica powder.
Yes, it's a very finely ground powdered stone.
Right.
Once mixed with water, it gives you a very almost pearlescent kind of look to things.
Which is amazing to look at that and think that that's not a liquid, but it sort of takes on this really curious liquid state. And organic, which I like. It's stone, not, it's not just made of millions of bits of plastic. We hate glitter here. Let's be clear about that.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, so we found through a combination of kind of just trials that we were doing in terms of colours of liquids or paints and things like that, and milk as well. We found a lot of mileage out of milk. Because it seems to render really nicely. It looks a lot like smoke, but the flip side of that I think found was that because it reflected so much light, so bright in the tank, it would reflect from the back surface of the tank quite easily, so you'd get almost like a ghost reflection, which we didn't want.
No.
So we went through some iterations of blacking out the inside surface of the tank with, I think, black drape and then some neoprene, which is like a rubber super matte.
That was like a roll mat or something, was it?
Yeah, something like that.
But it was really black and very matte. And you were absolutely right. So we ended up putting that inside the tank and fixing it. And then on the bottom as well, I think.
Yes. And we put weights down because it wanted to float.
And weights.
All this stuff you don't know until you try.
I mean, it seems obvious when it starts happening. And you go, oh, yeah. That actually blacked out the space really well. I mean, I'm getting this that we're looking at is not raw footage. It's sort of crunched, I guess, a little bit.
Yeah.
But it's pretty clean. And this is another that kind of downward spurt, and you can actually kind of see it somewhat hanging on to that wall of neoprene, whatever it is.
Yeah, milk in water seems to have some.
I love looking at this. This is like a Giga image. There's something really of his work about this.
Yeah, it kind of looks like bones or X-ray. Kind of
but it's moving slowly, and then you've got this wonderful hanging kind of layer on the floor that's like some mad, like the surface of a gas planet or something like that.
A lot of this was happy accidents by letting the milk, predominantly milk, settle, and it almost gave like a low-lying fog.
Yes.
Almost like dry ice.
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah.
And then this shot itself is what we used for one of our first tests for our mini sub shots.
Yeah, and when we shot that, it was literally stick it on a wire I think we cut out some bits of rock shape from cardboard, stuck a backlight behind that, did a top light, and that was and some smoke, and that was sort of it, just to kind of get a sense of, is that going to hold up? Using the sort of the budget lens that we have, and I think we were a little bit surprised at how good it looked.
Oh, it's just so easy, wasn't it? It was just super quick to do. And quite encouraging, and I think that kind of spurred us on to think about doing a dry for wet.
Yeah, definitely. And then you can see the difference that adding that kind of silty layer on top of it, and behind it. Pretty sure I can see some stuff in front and some behind. So you've created 2 layers there, right?
Yeah, and just a very simple kind of mask to give the impression that it's at different layers in the shot.
Nice. And JP's put a nice little demonstration together to give you kind of visual representation of how JP has layered a series of elements shots over each other, and then demonstrated how the camera can then move through that, and you get these different layers of elements that we're kind of moving through and moving past. And I know this is something, because we didn't have motion control at the time, we couldn't achieve a shot like that where the camera itself was moving through, and that's where you really get that sense of depth.
Yeah, we were somewhat limited in how dynamic we could be with our camera moves at that point. Now we're blessed with motion control facility, so in future we will be expanding upon this, I'm sure, and demonstrating some more impressive examples. But yes, the advantage of shooting plates, if you like, or static shots of our fish tank particles is that in post, in either a 3D graphics program or in something like After Effects that allows you to put a 2D plane in a 3D space.
It's kind of 2.5D, isn't it?
Yeah. And it's a really nice quick way of creating a depth or a volume or the impression of, because you can layer these or stack these layers up in 3D space and move your virtual camera.
Yeah.
And by going relative to their distance in and out or up, down, left and right, and to a degree how much you can pan round without revealing the 2D nature of those layers, you can impart an effect that's quite convincing, giving it a 3D volume. If you like.
So I suppose the next thing to talk about, so as I'm looking at, at this lovely example of moving through this layered series of elements, I think certainly a few people, some people even felt that we hadn't done any. And I think something that's really important to mention here is the YouTube compression.
Yes.
I mean, there's 2 reasons, right?
There's 2 reasons.
Okay, so go.
I think the first reason was probably that the shots themselves dictated that we kind of wanted to see what was going on.
Yeah.
These layers are additive, so in other words, even though you want the particles to be seen, you can only crush or up the contrast of the layers so much that once they're added together, you're going to lighten the whole image in contrast.
Yeah, because the let's say the black of this black and white image is not black.
Yes.
So it's only if it's pure black that will actually be removable as a layer.
Yeah, that's correct. Once they're stacked up, you start to notice the whole image starts to get very, very low contrast and lightened. So it's a bit of a delicate balance. But yes, it was a bit of a learning curve, because as discovered, the more that you add in terms of particulate or that kind of size of particle in a shot like that, in a dark shot with a lower compression, surprise, surprise, the wonderful recompression of YouTube wants to minimize that because it thinks it's noise.
Yeah. So we lost quite a lot.
A lot doesn't show up, yes. So in the final, in the full res version of those shots, they were a lot more visible. Which is worth bearing in mind, I think. So if you're doing a shot or a video or a sequence, whatever, and you are having very tiny little pinprick-sized stars or particulates, something like that, and they're in motion, it's worth bearing in mind to do some tests with your compression settings, and especially something like YouTube where it gets recompressed, just to double check that those details in the shadows and the dark areas of your image are registering.
Yeah, and like we say, this isn't just for YouTube. I mean, the way that you compress your video has an effect on these tiny details, and so there are certain things to kind of look out for when you're setting compression. I mean, obviously, you can't always make 100 gigabyte files. Having said that, we were approaching that when we were doing a master export for our first episode, where it was going to kind of show the full sequence, all the sequences throughout the episode.
I think the secret really is it's kind of project by project basis. You know, if you've got, like with our example, we've got very dimly lit scenes or very dark scenes or scenes where we have a gradient of light to dark. And one of the first artifacts through compression that you often see is the kind of stepping or the banding between the bright and the dark sections of the image. And it's just an artifact of compression. And I think, it's always good to do a little test and just double check that how you want things to look like are getting through the compression or recompression.
So yes, it's getting a little bit clever with that, and like you say, testing. It's all about testing. Because I think there's definitely more than one way to kind of approach shooting fish tank stuff, and I think to a degree it does depend on the size of the tank that you have.
Yeah, I think it's totally possible to get some good results with a smaller tank that you might have at home that doesn't have fish in it. You're obviously then limited with how wide you can go with your shots, or how much scale you can pack into that frame.
And where you can orientate a light if you're sort of having to black out. Because I mean, that's something I think that we found is that, it's ours is a very wide tank that I picked up, but it's not particularly deep. I mean, I think it's quite standard as fish tanks go. But I think certainly if we had something 3 times the depth of that, then we'd be opened up to the possibility of being able to shoot a plane of focus within the center of that tank. And then that way we wouldn't have to necessarily black out the tank itself. We could actually black out the area outside of the tank. Then we're opening ourselves up to different places we can put the lights and things like that. Because we were limited there because the background was blacked out. It's like, well, I've got to go in over the top as back as I can. And so, I think, in an ideal world, we'd have Doug Trumbull scale aquarium tank, which is, like a cubic meter or something larger.
7 feet squared or something.
But you work with what you've got.
So Alka-Seltzer.
Yes.
I didn't really know at the time how we were going to use it. We just thought some bubbles might be good to get. Alka-Seltzer. Other brands are available.
Of course.
Of whatever it is. Aspirin.
Fizzy make feel nice, I think is how Dylan Moran calls it.
Right. Yeah, they work really well. And again, we were mixing up frame rates. So we had 25 frames, which was our native frame rate, but we also went slower than that to 50. Did we go up to 75?
I honestly can't remember, which isn't very useful.
It's a long time ago. The smaller the bubbles, the better in terms of if you want to sell it as a bigger scale. The Alka-Seltzer that we used was good in that regard because it gave lots of little micro bubbles that were fairly consistent in speed, that could then be orientated on a layer itself and repositioned and tracked to our mini sub as it was descending, and also the rear propeller shot of our large sub as it exited frame away from us.
And that's funny actually as well, because a couple of the shots in some of these tests that we showed you actually were shot inside the tank, whereby Japes had rigged a dental mirror on an angle on the end of a probe lens so that we could actually move it through the water. And I was actually looking at that final shot where the sub goes away and thought actually it would have been quite cool to try and shoot some moving through some bubbles, almost as if they're kind of coming towards us, or it's going away, or moving it backwards through as if the bubbles are sort of leading a drain. There's all sorts of ways you can play.
Definitely, and like I said, we didn't shoot those bubbles necessarily with a shot in mind. So that's, they could have been shot specifically for those shots and looked a lot better, but they were worth putting in there because it's just an example of how you can manipulate these elements sometimes and kind of sometimes get away with them, sometimes not so much.
Yeah, absolutely. But that's something that we struggled with as well, because obviously there's only so long that we could shoot without shooting straight into the light. And when we started to go to those low angles, the top of the shot started to get so overlit, and there wasn't a lot we could do about that without cancelling the light completely.
I think going forward, I think if we were to do it again, I think one of the main takeaways would be to have, which we didn't have when we did the tank footage, was to have a playback of our previous takes with the model.
Yeah.
So we could not only line up precisely where our supposed interaction was with the sea floor, kicking up the silt, but we'd be able to we'd localize the scale and get everything lined up just right. Exactly the same with the bubbles as well. We could actually line up the perspective of the bubbles and do all that kind of stuff per shot. But yeah, this is just for demonstration purposes.
Absolutely. We'd care more if we were being paid. Honest.
So hopefully people can see a little window into perhaps what they might be able to achieve at home. Having a large fish tank is great, but you can achieve very similar results with a smaller tank.
Definitely. That's amazing, man. Thank you so much. Thank you for gathering all of this wonderful footage together for us to have a look through. Nice to take back to those early days as well. I hope you enjoyed that little kind of walkthrough. You know, we can never really go sort of deep dive on this stuff because I don't even know I'm doing it. But hopefully that was a nice little overview. And if you have questions, stick them in the comments and we will try to answer as many as we can. I love fish tanks. I love shooting with fish tanks. We've actually got a couple of feature projects coming up where we're hoping we can sneak in some fish tank stuff, which is very exciting. But I'm probably not allowed to say that. Actually, I didn't say what they were, so it's okay. So it's fine. Right, we're going to leave you there. Hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Hit the notification bell so you know when episodes are coming out. Share it with your friends, your enemies. We're on social media if you want to be there. Probably not, but well, you probably do. But it's still something we can't get away from. I'm going to stop rambling. It's been lovely, and we will see you for the next one.